No, there's no consistency today. Absolutely. It was an extremely poor effort in front of a large crowd on a really important day for us. We were very disappointing today. Very, very disappointing.
What was the worst aspect from your point of view?
Probably the overuse of handball was probably something that really showed up today. I mean, they're a very good football team. They pressure particularly well, and what they pressured us in was the contested possession, and we had some cough-up handballs. Even when we had opportunities to kick the football, we didn't really take those up. We didn't run and carry the ball and run at the game. We kicked, a little bit wide, and particularly in the first half, I think they had maybe 6 or 7 intercept marks by half, or might have been more than that. Maybe that's what they had in the second quarter. So I thought our fundamentals of the game, the contested possession and our skill level was really poor. But they certainly put us under enormous pressure. I'm not sure how many forward 50 tackles they had, and what they finished with, but I think at one stage they were at 29 or 30 or something. So they applied a lot of pressure for us, and we coughed it up with our handball, which resulted in some A-grade turnovers for them to score goals from. They were very, very impressive, even with the guys out of the team.
How did the last quarter today compare to that third quarter against Hawthorn earlier in the season? I think it was also 8 goals to 1.
Oh, I think in the last quarter we went inside 50 a few times, but their spread and their work off the ball, the amount of work that their players were doing when they didn't have the football. They spread really hard to the open side, and I think on 2 or 3 occasions the ball got out of our forward line without any pressure, and then they kicked their ball around from the back pocket to inside 50 a mark. They might have had 6 or 7 marks inside. And that's work rate for them, but it's also an attitude that they had certainly in the last quarter.
35 to 75 inside 50 is a bit of a common theme, that you're not getting it inside 50 against the good side.
We turned the ball over a lot mid-defence today. We probably had, I reckon, 6 or 7 occasions we had the ball through the middle of the ground and we coughed it up or turned the ball over. I mean, we were 1 kick away from going inside 50, but you can't afford to. You're not going to win too many games having 35 inside 50s. It's just not enough from us, and I think like I said, we turned it over too often in instances where we could have made something of the possession. I think a couple of times running through the middle of the ground we had it and we turned it over. I think there was one occasion where we actually handballed the ball forward. We had space and time and found a way to give the ball back to them. So we've got to get better at that.
You've got a bit of depth in the twos at the moment. Guys playing well. You're just going to have to make 4 or 5 changes for next week. You've got Cole Gale and those sort of types.
Yeah, we'll look at the team for next week. But on today's performance, you'd think there'd be at least a couple of changes. The guys who played well in the VFL last week, we've been pretty consistent in rewarding guys who've been in good form. So there's a couple of them played well yesterday.
Dean, what was your take on the Rivers Clayton in the first half? Would you like to? I know it's easy after the game. Would you like to have made the move earlier?
Oh, I think on a couple of occasions, it was more the lack of midfield pressure or the speed that Collingwood were able to win the turnover in the middle of the ground that gave them an easy inside 50 kick. And if you're going to give any team space and time to kick inside 50, they hurt you regardless of who you're playing against. And I thought our backs were let down. We didn't have enough midfield pressure to at least give them the opportunity to compete. So the majority of those, I think a couple got him over the back. But again, the delivery or the lack of pressure through the middle of the ground really showed, and that's what happened really.
So how did the goals dry up in the second half of the club?
Oh, we had more pressure through the third quarter. I mean, it was a pretty even third quarter. And the last quarter, they had too many uncontested inside 50 marks. So there's probably more of their boys and finding more options in the last quarter. But the third quarter, there was, more contest, more pressure through the middle of the ground. If you look at the stats in the third quarter, they were better with very little score during the third quarter. Up till then, it was pretty easy, free-flowing ball when we turned the ball over, and he got presented with a couple of good marks.
Is the biggest frustration just the massive difference between how good you were 9 or 10 days ago and what you were today? Any further thing on that?
Yeah, that's disappointing. I mean, because we came here today off a good win last week, and the confidence that we grew out of last week's game was really important, a really good motivating factor to play well today. There was a lot for us to play for today, an enormous amount of opportunity at the end of today's result, and we sit here very, very disappointed with the effort, and it's not good enough. I mean, regardless of last week's result, you get measured on the following week, and we were very, very poor today in all the key areas in the game. The fundamentals of the game, we coughed the ball up, we didn't win enough of our share of contested possession, and as was mentioned before, the inside 50 count was all one-way traffic, unfortunately.
You talked about that inconsistency for a few weeks. What else can you do to fix that?
Oh, well, we'll just keep making a few changes to the team and keep challenging the guys that are in the team from last week, who played today, and they've got to lift their work rate. I mean, it comes down to work rate most of the time. Work rate off the ball when you don't have it, to work rate when you've got it, and being predictable to each other. And I reckon some of our ball use today, we were a little bit unpredictable, but you got to give Collingwood have set a benchmark in the last couple of years there. I suppose the biggest lesson out of today is how far we've got to get to be able to compete with the reigning premiers and a team who's going to be around for a number of years yet, I think.
With the 2 Friday night games before, you're probably going to have this 3-week period with the biggest spotlight you're going to have for the year. How do you think you've come through it?
So say that in the last...
I guess, having the 2 Friday night games and now today the Queen's birthday match, probably the most public spotlight you're going to get for the year on the team. How do you think you've come through it?
Oh, in our last 3 weeks?
Yeah.
We won 1 game. So we haven't...
Beforehand, I think it was, it might even have been Jared Rivers said you're going to be judged on this 3-week period to see how you're going to go for the rest of the year. How did you rate those 3 weeks when you've been right at the forefront of the...
Well, we haven't performed well. We didn't perform well today. We performed well last week, but not the week before, so we didn't perform well.
What was the plea of what you said to players?
After the game? Oh, a little bit like we're discussing here, to be honest. Our inconsistency doesn't build any confidence at all. Only through consistency will we be able to, build a confidence that goes from week to week to week. And I think out of the game today, the lesson learnt was how effective the Pies were, and the pressure that they brought, particularly around our handball game, was forced turnovers. And there's great lessons for our young players who played today. I mean, one, the exposure, two, the performance, and three, those guys are going to have to dust themselves off next week, because when you're gaining experience as a young player, unfortunately, it's how you get back up the following week. And we expect our guys today to rebound very strongly next week, because we can't afford to be inconsistent. Like I said, inconsistency does not breed confidence.
Is Garland ready to come back?
Well, he played in the VFL on Saturday, so he'd be up for selection.
Letting Jarrah just coincide with a long year, a lot of pressure on, a lot of focus on him as the main man up forward.
Yeah, maybe. His work rate at times. There are times during the games where his work rate's quite good, but there are also times during the game where his work rate's not where it should be. If we're going to be inconsistent, then therefore we're going to be our work rate during games is going to be inconsistent. So he's one of many today, but no, because of his class as a player, he probably gets spotlighted more often than anyone else. But he's one of 22 today whose work rate just was nowhere near what it should be in a game where we were inconsistent, where we needed consistency. If that makes sense.